shoulder girdle is composed of the sternum, the clavicle, the scapula. Motions include elevation, depression, protraction, retraction, upward rotation, downward rotation, and scapular tilt. The shoulder joint is composed of the scapula and the humerus. It's a ball and socket joint with 3 degrees of freedom. Motions include flexion, extension, hyperextension, abduction, adduction, circumduction, lateral rotation, medial rotation, horizontal adduction, horizontal abduction. The elbow joint is composed of the humerus, the radius, and the ulna. The elbow joint has 1 degree of freedom, and it's a hinge joint. Motions include flexion and extension. The forearm is composed of the radius and the ulna. It's a pivot joint and has 1 degree of freedom. Actions include supination and pronation. The wrist joint is composed of the ulna, the radius, and the carpal. It has 2 degrees of freedom and is a condyloid joint. The motions include flexion, extension, neutral position, ulnar deviation, and radial deviation. The hand is composed of the carpals, the metacarpals, and the phalanges. The thumb is a saddle joint with 2 degrees of freedom. Motions include flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, opposition, and reposition. The fingers have 2 degrees of freedom. At the MCP, they are a condyloid joint, and at the DIP and PIP, they are hinge joints. Motions include flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. The starting position of phase 1, the shoulder girdle is protracted, the shoulder is flexed, elbow is extended, the forearm is pronated, the wrist is neutral, the thumb is extended, and the fingers are extended and adducted. In the ending position of phase 1, the shoulder girdle is protracted, the serratus anterior and pectoralis minor are concentrically contracted, the shoulder joint is flexed, the anterior deltoid and pectoralis minor are also concentrically contracted, the elbow joint is extended, the tricep brachii is concentrically contracted, the forearm is supinated, the supinator, biceps, and the biceps brachii are concentrically contracted. The wrist is in a neutral position, the flexor carpi radialis, flexor carpi ulnaris, extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, and extensor carpi ulnaris are isometric. The thumb is extended, extensor pollice longus, extensor pollice brevis are concentrically contracted. The fingers are extended by the extensor digitorum, extensor indicis, extensor digiti minimi, and they are concentrically contracted. They are also adducted by the palmar interosseae, and that is also concentrically contracted.
The starting position of phase 2 is the ending position of phase 1. The ending position of phase 2, your right hand is going to your left shoulder. The shoulder girdle is protracted from the serratus anterior and the pectoralis minor concentrically contracting. The shoulder is slightly flexed with the anterior deltoid and pectoralis major concentrically contracting. The shoulder is also medially rotated from the latissimus dorsi, the teres major, and the subscapularis concentrically contracting. The elbow is flexed with the biceps brachii, brachialis, and brachioradialis concentrically contracting. The forearm is supinated, and the supinator is isometrically contracting. The wrist is in neutral position with the flexor carpi radialis, the flexor carpi ulnaris, the extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, and extensor carpi ulnaris isometrically contracting. The thumb is extended with the extensor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis concentrically contracting. The fingers are extended with the extensor digitorum, extensor indicis, extensor digiti minimi concentrically contracting, and the fingers are adducted with the palmar interossei concentrically contracting.
The beginning of phase 3 is the ending of phase 2. Phase 3 ends with the hand ending up behind the head. The shoulder girdle is upwardly rotated by the upper trapezius, lower trapezius, serratus anterior. It is elevated by the upper trapezius, levator scapula, and rhomboids. They all concentrically contract. The shoulder is abducted by the deltoids and supraspinatus. These also concentrically contract. The elbow is flexed by the biceps brachii, brachialis, and brachioradialis, which are also concentrically contracted. The forearm is pronated by both the pronator teres and pronator quadratus, which are also concentrically contracted. The wrist is slightly extended. This is by the extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor carpi ulnaris, which are concentrically contracted. The thumb is extended by the extensor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, concentrically contracted. The fingers are slightly flexed by the flexor digitorum superficialis, the flexor digitorum profundus, and flexor digiti minimi. These are concentrically contracted. The fingers are also adducted by the palmar interossei.
The starting position for phase 4 is the ending position for phase 3. The ending position for phase 4 is as follows. The shoulder girdle is protracted. The serratus anterior and pectoralis minor are concentrically contracted. The shoulder joint is horizontally adducted and medially rotated. The anterior deltoid, pectoralis major, latissimus dorsi, teres major, and subscapularis are concentrically contracted. The elbow is slightly flexed. The biceps brachii, brachialis, brachioradialis are concentrically contracted. The forearm is in mid position. The supinator, pronator quadratus, pronator teres are isometrically contracted. The wrist is slightly flexed. The flexor carpi radialis and flexor carpi ulnaris are concentrically contracted. The thumb is extended. The extensor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis are concentrically contracted. The fingers are slightly flexed and adducted. The flexor digitorum superficialis, flexor digitorum profundus, flexor digiti minimi, and palmar interossei are concentrically contracted.